Okay, let's talk about one of the most confusing and one of the most important stories in the history of guitar tone. Why is it that when you say 5150, you could be talking about 3, maybe 4 completely different amplifiers, all made by 2 different companies? It's because the history of this amp isn't just a product timeline, it's a story about a 13-year partnership, a corporate divorce, and a custody battle over a name. This is the twisted family tree of the 5150. So let's set the stage. It's 1990. Eddie Van Halen is the biggest rock star on the planet, and his brown sound, that hot-rodded Marshall tone, is the stuff of legend. But Eddie was a notorious tone chaser. He was done cloning his old sound. He wanted to forge a new path. By this point, he was already using a Soldano SLO 100, which he used all over the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge album. That Soldano, with its cascaded gain stages, was the real missing link. It was modern high gain, and it was the sonic blueprint for what he wanted next. He takes this idea to Peavey Electronics, and Peavey, in a genius move, assigns their lead analog engineer to the project, a guy named James Brown. No, not that James Brown. This is the godfather of the 5150 sound. For 2 years, Eddie and James went back and forth with all kinds of changes. Eddie provided the vision. He famously told James he wanted more gain than I'll ever need. James Brown provided the engineering, literally adding an extra 12 AX7 preamp tube to give it a lot more gain. The amp they created, the 1992 block letter Peavey 5150, got its sound from 5 or 6 cascading gain stages. Instead of 1 or 2 stages being hammered, this was a chain of stages all adding a bit of juicy harmonic saturation. It was an absolute monster. But it had a famous flaw, the clean channel. If you've ever owned one, you know, the clean channel isn't clean. And that's because it was never designed to be clean. On the original, it's actually labelled rhythm. James Brown confirmed it was never meant to be a dedicated clean channel. It was designed for Eddie, who gets his cleans by rolling his guitar's volume knob down. That so-called flaw made it a one-trick pony for some players, but that one trick was about to change the world. And this is where the tonal disconnect happens. The amp's secret life. Even with all that gain on tap, Eddie reportedly ran the amp with the gain set around 6. He was still chasing his sound. But a new generation of metal bands in the 90s, they saw that knob, they saw it went to 10, and they cranked it. This amp wasn't just a hot-rodded Marshall, it had a secret weapon, a cold bias circuit. All that means is that the low end was incredibly tight, aggressive, and percussive. That was the key. It's why the 5150 retains clarity even with low tunings. Perfect for the new wave of 7, 8, and 9 string guitarists. In 1994, Machine Head released Burn My Eyes. That record was a perfect showcase of the 5150's groundbreaking savagery. It was the shot heard around the metal world. Suddenly, everyone was using them. Virtuosos like Joe Satriani and Buckethead were early adopters. But it was the underground metal scenes that truly embraced it, especially in places like Sweden with bands like In Flames. And this is where a lot of us, myself included, got confused. I mean, for years I owned a 5150 and I didn't really have any idea that Eddie Van Halen was the signature owner and designer of the amp. I just knew it was the metal amp. It became the sound of 2000's metalcore. A big load of bands built their sound on it. Trivium, Bullet for Valentine, Atreyu, Unearthed, Chimera, Arch Enemy. That legacy continues today with bands like Gojira, Knocked Loose and Code Orange. They all use the recipe. You know it, you've heard it, you take your Peavey 5150 head, plug it into a Mesa Boogie 412 cab, and in front you put a trusty tube screamer or a Maxon OD808. If you're new, you're probably thinking, why put a pedal in front of a high gain amp? Well, you're not using the pedal for distortion, are you? You're using it to turn the gain to 0, and then you crank that level. The pedal's real magic is that it acts like an EQ. Cuts out that MIDI bass frequency, and it tightens the low end before it even hits the amp. That combination, a 5150's cold bias circuit hit by a boosted tube screamer, or Maxon OD808, into a Mesa 412, that is the sound of modern metal. Period. Full stop. It almost single-handedly started the gent movement. Isn't it funny that modern metal guitarists use an amp that was built in 1992 and a pedal that was built in like 1979? Modern metal. Interesting, right? So the amp is a massive success. The partnership with Peavey lasts 13 years. And then, in 2004, it all fell apart. This is where it gets messy. Why the split? The official story, according to Peavey CEO Cortland Gray, is that the relationship got strained when Peavey signed another superstar shredder, Joe Satriani. The theory is that Eddie always figured he was the artist for Peavey, and when they brought in Satch to create the JSX, great amp by the way, it rubbed him the wrong way. But there are also other rumours, stories of personal reliability issues, and even a failed promotional event where Eddie was supposed to be sober, but allegedly showed up drunk. Wherever the final straw was, the partnership was over. And this is where the custody battle began. The moment that creates all the confusion that we now have today. In the divorce, who gets what? Eddie Van Halen kept the rights to the names 5150 and Wolfgang. Peavey Electronics kept the circuitry, the tone, the actual amp design that James Brown had engineered. You see the problem? The name went one way and the sound went the other. So now the timeline forks. Path 1, Peavey. Peavey has this legendary best-selling amp, but they can't call it the 5150 anymore. So what do? Their 40th anniversary was coming up, and they were founded in 1965, and it was now 2005. They renamed the 5150 the 6505. The 5152, which had an extra preamp tube and independent EQs for a better clean channel, then became the 6505 Plus. This is the most important thing to get. The Peavey 6505 is the Peavey 5150. It's the original 1992 James Brown circuit, the raw, pissed off sounding amp that the metalcore scene was built on. Path number 2, Eddie Van Halen. So around 2005, Eddie takes his 5150 name and launches his own brand, EVH, in a massive partnership with Fender. Fender would handle all the manufacturing and distribution. In 2007, the EVH brand releases its new flagship amp, the EVH 5150-3. Now, this is not a reissue of the Peavey amp, it's a brand new, ground up design. Eddie, with his new team at Fender, including Chip Ellis and Keith Chapman, designed his ultimate holy grail amp. And the biggest change? It has 3 independent channels. Why? Because this amp was designed to finally have a truly clean, crystal clear channel. The one thing the 92 original never really had. You've got channel 1 for sparkling cleans, channel 2 for super heavy crunch, and channel 3 for that aggressive, modern, liquid gain. It was a different beast. People who play both will tell you the 6505 is rawer and has more character, while the 5150-3 is smoother, thicker, chuggier, and way more versatile. So now we've got 2 different 5150 Bloodlines, both being made at the same time. But the story has one more twist. The EVH 5150-3 is a premium all-tube beast, and it's expensive. The EVH brand needed something to compete at a more affordable price point. Something to go head-to-head with the Peavey 6505 that was still so popular. This leads to the EVH 5150 Iconic. And this is the full circle moment. Who do you think EVH and Fender hired to design their new affordable mass market 5150? James Brown, the exact same engineer who designed the original 1992 Peavey circuit. He was brought back decades later to design the new amp bearing the 5150 name. And he did it with a brilliant, efficient design. The Iconic is a hybrid amp, but that's a misleading term. It's not solid state distortion. James Brown designed it to use just 2 12AX7 tubes for all the core gain and tone shaping, and solid state components for the utility stuff. The effects loop, the channel switching, the reverb. It was a genius way to cut costs while keeping the tube gain DNA. It's also packed with modern features, a built-in noise gate, burn and overdrive boost switches, and a speaker emulated DI out. It strikes the perfect balance between the raw original and the modern 5150-3. So that is the twisted history, and that's why it's so confusing. It's a story that forks into 3 separate legacies, all of which are still being made today. You've got the Peavey 6505, the original raw 1992 James Brown circuit, the sound of 90s metal and 2000s metalcore. You've got the EVH 5150-3, Eddie's perfected vision, the versatile 3-channel all-tube monster with a real clean channel. And you've got the EVH 5150 Iconic, the full circle amp, the return of James Brown creating an affordable modern version that balances classic tone with new features. It's one hell of a story, and it's why one name, 5150, defines 3 different but equally legendary eras of guitar tone. Let me know in the comments which 5150 model is your favourite.